The city of Galway, Ireland is one of the most culturally rich places not only in Ireland, but the world in general. Until the last century, its isolation on the fringes of Europe has limited its exposure to the influences from other places, and the region has even been one of the small pockets that have kept the Irish language alive. The Galway City Museum does a spectacular job of showcasing the history of the area and of Greater Ireland. Hey everybody, this is Colonel Carson with Family Tree Nuts, and recently we visited the Galway City Museum in Galway, Ireland, and we wanted to share it with you. In this video, we will give you a quick tour that shows you most of what you will find inside, and share a wealth of historical information about the region. Here at Family Tree Nuts, we make videos at historic locations all over the United States and a few countries. So if you like these types of videos, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click that bell so you get notified when we post new videos. This video is one of several that we have from Ireland, so be sure to check out our Ireland playlist. Now let's go check out the museum and discover some history. The Galway City Museum sits on one of the most historic sites in the city, just next to the Spanish Arch, which is one of the remaining sections of the medieval wall that once surrounded the city. Since ancient times, this very spot was occupied with the hustle and bustle of the life-bringing sea trade that has been so important to the region. The museum sits on the river Corrib, where it empties into Galway Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. Just across the river is the famous village of Clotta, the home of the famous Clotta rings, which we will talk about later in this video. Also, if you've learned something in this video, we'd love to hear about that. Leave us a comment below what you learned and your favorite thing about the museum. It's always good to read what it is that folks enjoy. The Galway City Museum was founded in 1976 and was originally located in the Comerford House, which was built around the year 1800 and was the private house of artist Clare Sheridan, who was the first cousin to Winston Churchill. The first museum closed in 2004, but reopened in 2007 at its current building. The displays are primarily in the Irish language, but are also displayed in English. The doors are open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and admission is free. You heard that right, free. When you first come into the museum, you will see incredible photographs that show the historic scenes of the city. The photos have been colorized, which makes the scenes pop, and you can almost hear the sounds that were present when the photos were taken. Here you will see the statue of the famous Pádraig Ó Cinnéir. Pádraig was born Patrick Joseph Conroy in 1882 in Galway. He was orphaned and went to live with his uncle in Rossmuck in Connemara, which was one of the last holdout regions that spoke almost entirely Irish. In the year 1900s, Patrick took a job in London, England, and joined the Gaelic League, whose goal was to revive the Irish language. At that time, less than 1% of the population of Ireland spoke Irish. Patrick began writing stories under the name Pádraig Ó Cinnéir, and his writings were about the real-life struggles of the Irish, such as poverty, immigration, and mental illness. He died at the young age of only 46, but his impact on the culture of the Irish people and the so-called rebirth of the Irish language had made him a national hero. As you continue down the hall, you will enter an open room showing the 3 stories of the museum. Here you can learn about the region in ancient prehistoric times, with ancient weapons on display. This area of the museum has a great exhibit about the stone forts found on the Aran Islands, just off the coast of Galway. These stone forts were occupied between the years 900 and 1100. Once you go up the stairs to the second level, you will come to an exhibit about the Gaelic people. Here you can learn about the historic legends, social structure, culture, and religions of the people. Here's a look at several of the well-done and informative exhibits here. You may want to pause the video so you can read the displays. One of my favorite things about my Irish ancestry is the importance of the Shawnee, who were the storytellers and keepers of history. The Shawnee kept and orally passed on the local legends and the genealogy of important people, such as the clan chiefs. I proudly consider myself a modern-day Shawnee because I consider it my mission and passion to preserve and pass on as much history as I can. As you move further into this exhibit, you will find various artifacts with displays of other important occupations in the Gaelic culture, such as the Clare Sheridan, which is a Gaelic harper, the alum, which is a teacher of Gaelic arts in Gaelic schools, usually attended by boys of wealthy families, and the Anlia, which were physicians. You will also see other historical items that were important to the region. Moving on through the museum, you will find a spectacular display of things from the struggle in the early 1900s for Irish independence. This struggle and the politics involved was extremely complicated and in some ways is still going on today. This subject alone would be an entire series of videos, so we won't attempt to get into any details in this video. However, I will give a brief summary and show you some of the exhibits in the Galway Museum. For close to 800 years, Ireland had been under the English or British rule. Over the centuries, there has been numerous attempts to drive out the English or the British, but due to either sheer force or complicated Anglo-Irish relations, the Irish were never able to break free. Around the end of the 1800s, a strong movement for Irish home rule began to gain momentum. Propaganda for a free Ireland became common, and organizations were formed such as the Gaelic League, which advocated for the rebirth of the Irish language, and the Gaelic Athletic Association, which organized the playing of traditional Irish athletics. Organizations like these assisted in the feeling of the population to identify more as Irish than British. In 1913, the Irish Volunteers Force was organized and branches exploded all over Ireland. It should be mentioned that while Irish independence was growing, there were still many that were very loyal to the Crown. The situation continued to gain steam, and the following year, Great Britain entered into the Great War, or as we call it today, World War I. By 1916, over 146,000 Irish were fighting in the war, and most of them were those that were loyal to Great Britain. It was a perfect storm for the Irish Republicans because Great Britain had its hands full in the war, and many of the Unionists were off fighting. The time bomb finally went off during the 1916 Easter Rising event, when the Irish Republicans seized several government buildings in Dublin and the proclamation of the Irish Republic was signed and published. The event was supposed to happen all over Ireland, and while several events did take place throughout the Emerald Isle, they were very minor compared to the actions in Dublin. There was a plan to take out key buildings in Galway, but the plan never happened. However, the rebels were successful in taking some policemen prisoner and barricaded some key roads, and cut some telephone lines and damaged railways. The rebel leaders were soon arrested and were taken to be imprisoned on the British warship in Galway Bay. When they were led down the streets, the people booed them and threw mud on them. This shows how divided the population really was. Over the next few years, the Irish people were persuaded more and more in favor of the rebels. This was due to the fact that the British mishandled many of the situations and created many martyrs. One of those martyrs was James Sheamus Quirk, who in September 1920 fell victim to a horrible event. Following a skirmish between government forces and rebels, the forces of the Crown went on a terror in Galway. Quirk was taken half-dressed from his bed and beaten severely before being forced to stand under a lamppost at the end of the docks and shot in the stomach several times. He was left for dead, but somehow managed to get back to his bed and send for the priest, Father Michael Griffin. It is estimated that about 10,000 people came to the joint funerals of Quirk and John Mulvoy, who had been killed in the initial skirmish. Father Griffin, who was a known Republican sympathizer, was also murdered 2 months later, and his body found in a shallow grave. Martyrs such as these began to change the public opinion in favor of the rebels. The other thing that helped to sway public opinion to the side of the Irish Republicans was the handling of the affairs by the Royal Irish Constables, who were a force of the Crown. As RIC members retired and/or resigned, their numbers were hard to replace with local Irish because of their growing unpopularity. The British government began to recruit men from England, Scotland, and Wales that were veterans of World War I. These new recruits were called black and tans due to the colors of their uniform and were known for their indiscriminate violence. The black and tans became a feared and hated occupational force, which turned more and more local Irish to the side of the Republicans. Elections were becoming overwhelmingly in favor of the Republicans, except for the British stronghold in Ulster. Eventually, Ireland won its independence from the Crown on December 6, 1922. The fight was far from over, and now Ireland fell into a civil war for control of the government. 4 members of the IRA, Stephen Joyce, Martin Burke, Michael Walsh, and Herbert Collins, were executed on January 20th, 1923 for being in possession of arms and ammunition. Their coffin plates are on display at the museum. The Civil War ended in 1923, and as a result, the counties in Ulster became what was then called Northern Ireland and remained part of the United Kingdom. Various artifacts relevant to the struggle for independence are in display at the museum, including several pistols of the conflict. The next exhibit that you come to at the museum is about the Clotta. We have an entire separate video about Clotta, so you will want to check that out for more information, but I'll give you a quick summary as I show you some of the images of the exhibit. Clotta is an area of Galway on the opposite side of the River Corb as this museum. It historically was a tiny fishing hamlet full of simple thatched roof houses. The village originally sat outside the medieval walls of Galway and was not unlike small villages all over Ireland. One thing about Clotta is that it was extensively photographed and drawn, which is valuable in helping us see how many of our ancestors lived during that time. The other thing that Clotta is known for is its famous ring that so many of us all over the world wear today. The ring symbolizes love, loyalty, and friendship, with the heart representing love, the crown, loyalty, and the hands, friendship. The ring has become a popular wedding ring, and the way it is worn on either hand has symbolic meanings. The ring originates from this little village around the year 1700. The main legend states that a man named Richard Joyce, who lived in Clotta, was engaged to his love, but on a trip to the West Indies, he was captured by North African Arab pirates and enslaved in Algeria. He was purchased by an Arab jewelry maker who taught Joyce the art of goldsmithing. Joyce longed for his sweetheart back home and used his new skill to fashion a ring that represented his love for her. After 14 years as a slave, the British king worked out a treaty, and all the British subjects that were in captivity were released. Joyce's master did not want to see him go because he'd become quite fond of him, and his skills made the business quite a bit of money. The master offered Joyce a partnership in the business, and even the hand of his beautiful daughter in marriage if he would stay. But Joyce's love for his sweetheart was always on his mind, and he longed to return to her. When Joyce arrived back home in Clotta, he found out that his sweetheart had never married and had never given up hope that he would return. The couple were soon married, and Joyce began manufacturing the ring that his love story sold. Eventually, the ring became popular all over the region, and then Ireland, and now the world. Many of us view it as a symbol of our own Celtic heritage, and it all started in this tiny fishing village. The Clotta exhibit has spectacular displays, one of which is a scale model of the area. The exhibit also has a full wall of open glass looking over the Clotta, and a key shows interesting things that you're looking at. Around the corner you can see great views of the famous Spanish Arch here. Once again, don't forget to check out our full video about this amazing ring, the village, and its history. The last exhibit that we will discuss today is the one of maritime history and marine biology. Fishing has always been critical to the success of the community in Galway. and the museum displays a sample of a typical fishing boat of the area that is referred to as a Galway hooker. Did you know that Ireland's underwater territory is 10 times larger than its land territory? All of the area has not been explored yet, and it is exciting to think of the future possibilities for the use of this ocean territory. This completes our quick tour of the Galway City Museum. We hope that you have learned a little bit about this amazing place that is so valuable in helping us to better understand the history of the region and of Ireland as a whole. Be sure to take time to visit this museum when you come to Galway. Hey, I almost forgot. We have another video that you may enjoy called The Top 20 Things to See in Galway. Be sure to check that out as well. And remember, family tree nuts, let our nuts find the nuts in your family tree.